After Brian Wilson passed away, his ex-wife, who had quietly stood behind the ups and downs of this musical legend, finally broke her silence, and what she shared truly left fans speechless. What happened behind those closed doors for so many decades? Is there something we've never known about Brian's real life? If you felt something special from this story, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, comment with the number 0. And don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel and never miss other shocking behind-the-scenes stories. The handwritten letter she sent will change the way we understand one of the most tortured musical geniuses of all time. This is not a former wife of a celebrity seeking attention, but a private letter addressed to their daughters rather than being sold to tabloids, containing deeply personal revelations that give us a clearer understanding of the person behind Pet Sounds. "I used to hope that Brian would overcome the chaotic world he was sinking into," she wrote. "But then I realized that it was something no one from the outside could save him from." What makes this moment remarkable is not only the breaking of a silence that lasted for decades, but also what her words reveal about the deep divide between the sunlit melodies of California and the psychological darkness that was consuming Brian. The shocking factor isn't what Marilyn wrote, but the reason why she completely vanished from his story for nearly half a century. While the world celebrated a musical genius, she witnessed something much darker, a brilliant mind unraveling right before her eyes. Before we dive deeper, here are 5 shocking truths about Brian Wilson's hidden struggles. Brian often wrote Beach Boys hits while continuously crying in the studio. He would hear voices criticizing his music, sometimes even while performing. While recording Pet Sounds, he worked non-stop for 20 hours and then stayed in bed the entire day. The musicians in the studio were instructed not to make direct eye contact with him during recording sessions. There was a time when he spent up to 3 years without leaving his bedroom, even while still married to Marilyn. The letter changed everything. Just 6 days after Brian Wilson passed away, a 2-page handwritten letter arrived at Carney Wilson's house. The sender was none other than Marilyn Ravivel, Brian's first wife and the mother of his daughters. What makes this letter so special is not just the timing of its delivery, but its very existence. Since their divorce in 1979, Marilyn had remained completely silent about Brian. No interviews, no memoirs, no documents. She had essentially erased herself from the public narrative of his life. The letter, written on June 5th, 6 days before Brian passed away, was composed as his health rapidly declined, but before he took his final breath. One passage in the letter reads, "I love Brian with all my heart." Another says, "And I witnessed the unraveling of a person that only he could understand." This is not the work of a vengeful ex-wife seeking revenge, but rather a final acknowledgement of a chapter that Brian's public story had overlooked. Carney kept the letter with her throughout her father's funeral. During a private family gathering after the service, part of the letter was read aloud, not to attract attention, but to finally acknowledge the painful truths Marilyn couldn't share while Brian was alive. The most revealing part was how Marilyn described Brian as a soul unable to live in reality, a simple yet heartbreaking remark about the man whose musical creations changed pop culture, while his personal reality was slowly unraveling. Marilyn, the teenage wife who witnessed genius. In 1962, as the Beach Boys were beginning to reach the peak of their fame, 19-year-old Brian Wilson met Marilyn Ravivel, a member of the girl group The Honeys. Despite opposition from Brian's father, Murray, they married in December 1964. Marilyn was just 17, while Brian was 22, and already showing signs of the mental health issues that would shape his life. Their marriage coincided exactly with the most creative period of Brian's career, when he gave up touring to focus entirely on songwriting in the studio, revolutionizing recording techniques and pushing the boundaries of pop music. While America was captivated by the bright optimism in the Beach Boys' hits, Marilyn was witnessing something entirely different at home. Have you ever wondered about the untold stories behind Brian Wilson's life? His ex-wife remained silent for many years, but now she has decided to speak the truth. How do you think this will change the way fans view this legend? Comment below. Do you believe what she shared? Write yes or no. And if you've ever loved Brian Wilson's music, don't forget to hit like to show your support. Along with the creative genius that produced California Girls, Brian became increasingly consumed by auditory hallucinations, delusions, and paralyzing anxiety. While recording Pet Sounds in 1966, now considered one of the greatest albums of all time, Marilyn witnessed Brian's increasingly erratic behavior. He would work tirelessly in the studio for days, then retreat to his bed, unable to do anything. The songs You Still Believe in Me and Caroline were not just tracks, but hidden cries for help wrapped in beautiful music. Their daughters, Carney and Wendy, were born in 1968 and 1969, but parenthood did not help Brian stabilize his life. On the contrary, it only pushed him further into collapse. When the ambitious Smile project fell apart, Marilyn almost raised the children alone, while dealing with a husband who couldn't leave his bed for weeks. Brian was not only drifting away from me, she wrote, he was drifting away from himself. I watched the man I married slowly disappear into a mind that was turning against him, from wife to caregiver. By the early 1970s, Marilyn's role had shifted from wife to full-time caregiver. Brian's drug use increased, from occasional LSD to cocaine, amphetamines, and heavy drinking. His weight skyrocketed as he spent entire days in bed, overeating. The creative genius who once controlled every aspect of the Beach Boys' music could now no longer control the basic functions of his own body. There were days I had to dress him, she wrote. I would leave food next to his bed and return to find it untouched. Sometimes he would sit and stare at the ceiling for hours, believing he was hearing messages from the air conditioner. During this period, Marilyn not only had to manage Brian's condition, but also had to protect their daughters from the truth about their father's illness. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that their father is lying in bed because his mind is telling him horrible things? She wrote in the letter. How do you convey that pain to a child? By the mid-1970s, the situation became unbearable. In desperation, the family turned to the controversial therapist, Dr. Eugene Landy, who initially seemed to help Brian maintain some level of function, but ultimately led to another form of control and exploitation. The divorce erased her. When Marilyn finally filed for divorce in 1979, after nearly 15 years of marriage, there were no media wars, no disputes over Brian's music assets, no revealing interviews. She simply withdrew, not only from the marriage, but from the entire story of Brian. While Brian remained in the public eye and eventually fell under the complete control of Eugene Landy, Marilyn disappeared into private life. She focused on raising Carney and Wendy, but never capitalized on her relationship with Brian or the Beach Boys. This complete separation was not only rare, but unprecedented. Most ex-wives of famous musicians maintain some form of public relationship, but Marilyn did nothing of the sort. For over 45 years, she remained absolutely silent about Brian Wilson. Her letter ultimately explains why leaving Brian was not just about ending a marriage. It was acknowledging that I couldn't save someone drowning in their own mind, she wrote. The only way I could protect myself and our daughters was by creating a total break. This separation was so profound that when Brian married his second wife, Melinda Ledbetter, in 1995, Marilyn did not offer any public congratulations. When Brian received Lifetime Achievement Awards, She did not appear. When films about his life were made, she declined all interview requests. I decided that my life with Brian ended the day I left, she wrote. Not out of anger or bitterness, but because holding on to any connection, no matter how small, would keep me trapped in the orbit of someone who had collapsed in on themselves like a dying star. While Marilyn kept her distance, Brian's life took another turn with the arrival of Melinda Ledbetter in 1986. Their meeting at a Cadillac dealership where Melinda worked became part of Brian Wilson's legend. The car saleswoman recognized something special in the struggling musician. At the time, Brian was still under the control of Eugene Landy. This controversial therapist had controlled every aspect of Brian's life, from medication and diet to finances and creative decisions. Melinda recognized what this exploitation was. Over the next few years, she carefully documented Landy's abusive behavior and built a legal case, ultimately leading to a court order in 1991 that severed all ties between Landy and Brian. When Brian and Melinda married in 1995, it marked the beginning of a new stability for him. With Melinda managing his care, Brian completed and released Smile, nearly 4 decades after it had been abandoned, went on tour again, and received recognition for his innovations. Marilyn's letter acknowledges this chapter with unexpected grace. I thank Melinda for being able to provide what Brian needed in a way I couldn't. She came into his life at a different time, with different resources. The Brian she married was not the Brian I knew. The brilliant creator and the young father who had fallen apart were both gone. The most touching revelation in Marilyn's letter relates to the period after Melinda passed away in early 2024. Despite having kept her distance for decades, she revealed that she had quietly monitored Brian's condition through family connections. When I heard the news of Melinda's passing, she wrote, I immediately knew what it meant for Brian. Without her as an anchor to keep him grounded in reality, I feared he would drift away completely. This prediction became a tragic reality. After Melinda passed away, Brian's health rapidly declined. His memory loss disease progressed significantly. According to family sources, he often forgot that Melinda had passed away and repeatedly asked about her. These questions became even more heartbreaking as he could not comprehend the reality around him, leaving those around him feeling helpless in the face of his deterioration. In a particularly poignant passage, Marilyn reveals that she wrote a letter to Brian during this time, a letter sent to his home but likely beyond his comprehension due to his condition. I wanted him to know that despite everything, the years we shared still mean so much to me. The letter was placed on the piano, where Brian had composed the first Beach Boys songs, symbolizing the closure of a circle that began when they first met as teenagers. The most touching revelation in Marilyn's letter relates to the period after Melinda passed away in early 2024. Despite keeping her distance for decades, she revealed that she had quietly followed Brian's condition through family connections. When I heard the news of Melinda's passing, she wrote, I immediately knew what it meant for Brian. Without her as an anchor to keep him grounded in reality, I feared he would drift away completely. This prediction became a tragic reality. After Melinda passed away, Brian's health rapidly deteriorated. His memory loss disease progressed significantly. According to family sources, he often forgot that Melinda had passed away and repeatedly asked about her. In an emotional gesture, Marilyn wrote a letter to Brian and placed it on the piano where he had composed the first Beach Boys songs, symbolizing the closure of a meaningful circle in their relationship. Perhaps the people who gained the deepest understanding from Marilyn's letter were Carney and Wendy Wilson, who grew up in a complex reality as the daughters of Brian Wilson, while having little opportunity to connect with him as a father. Both women later had notable music careers, with Wilson Phillips achieving great success with hits like Hold On and Release Me. Their success represents a different kind of musical legacy, acknowledging their father's genius while also asserting their own artistic identity. Carney has openly spoken about the difficulties of growing up with a father severely affected by mental illness. She described Christmas mornings when Brian would remain in bed, unable to join in the family celebrations, and times when he seemed to look through his daughters rather than at them. These experiences created a challenging and complex reality, but they are also an inseparable part of the Wilson family's story. What Marilyn's letter provided them with was context, a deeper understanding of the man who had, in some ways, been lost to his illness. At a private family gathering after Brian's funeral, Carney kept the letter with her as part of it was read aloud, not for publicity, but as a final acknowledgement of a chapter in Brian's life that had largely been erased from the public story of his life. This is how a circle was closed, starting from when Brian and Marilyn met as teenagers during the early days of the California Sound. Brian Wilson's musical legacy is undeniable. Pet Sounds will continue to stand as one of the greatest albums of all time. Good Vibrations will still be studied for its revolutionary production techniques. However, Marilyn Ravivel's final words provide important context for this legacy. They remind us that behind the sunny harmonies was a man battling monsters that most of us could never imagine, in a family caught up in the whirlpool of his tumultuous creative mind. Marilyn's decision to break her silence only after his death, and in such a private way, clearly reflects her character and the complexity of their relationship. Brian's music came from a place that most people could never access. Her letter concludes, "The cost of that access was that he could never fully live in the world we live in. I hope that now, finally, the harmony he created in his music has found its way into his soul." In the simple and emotional words from the woman who understood him best, both when his creative abilities were at their peak and when his personal reality began to unravel, we can find the truest epitaph for one of the most influential and troubled musical geniuses. Brian Wilson created sounds that changed the way we hear the world. Marilyn Ravivel Wilson, in the end, broke her silence and changed the way we understand the man behind those sounds. If you find this story moving, subscribe to receive more in-depth analyses of the hidden truths behind the greatest legends in history. Leave your thoughts in the comments about how Brian Wilson's music has touched your life and what you think about the emotional final chapter of his story.